Welcome to the latest edition of the NFLC Live Teacher Panel. My name is Thomas Sauer, and I'm greeting you tonight from the somewhat warm state of Maryland. And we're really excited to have our panel today, which we thought might not even happen given everything that's going around in the country. And no, it's not politics, it's actually the weather. And so I'm really excited to have everybody here. And why don't we just go quickly around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. Shelli, since you're alphabetic first, why don't we start with you?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shelli Brown. I am here in the very chilly Texas. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we are so happy that you're able to make it. We're glad that you're warm, that you're safe, and of course that you have internet, because what could you do without that, right? Certainly couldn't do your job anymore. So somebody was earlier today in a meeting sharing that there were memes going around like teacher level 386. Now try to teach remotely without internet or internet.
Go. Yeah.
All right, Ying, how about introducing yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ying, and hello from the sunny California. And I'm teaching high school Mandarin Chinese here from the heart of the Silicon Valley. So internet is a must here.
We are so excited to have you here. And last but certainly not least, Mike.
Oops. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Travers. I'm a Spanish teacher from Massachusetts, where it's been oddly foggy, and actually we've had some melting going on while we keep along with the weather theme. I'm excited to be here with everybody tonight.
And we have a really interesting topic actually tonight. We're going to dig into the TEL planning domain. And just to let everybody know, we have about 4 questions that we have kind of pre-planned to go into that topic, talking about the importance of moving from input so that students can produce eventually in the interpersonal presentational mode, producing output. We invite all of you to actually join the conversation. You can add your comment or your question via Facebook and YouTube, and if appropriate, we will be able to try to bring it in and have our panelists answer your question. So just if you're on Facebook, just leave a comment on this video, or if you're watching live, of course, or if you are on YouTube, you can leave one in the right-hand side chat there as well. Okay, so we are talking about weaving the modes, and it's a conversation I just had with a colleague, or several colleagues of mine, for the last couple of weeks as we were developing some materials for teachers, and we got into a very heated argument actually, and because I kept saying, but this is not interpretive, it's presentational. And they were like, no, it's presentation, it's interpretive. I said, but it's not. And we were literally going back and forth about what this mode was. And then of course, at the end, we settled on the thing that, well, it really is both. It was one of those activities that started as an interpretive, but ended up being, I forgot what it was, presentational or interpersonal, but we were trying to put it into that box. And as more and more teachers have discovered the modes, or as curricula is being written all around the country in the modes, which was a very important step. I'm thinking now we have a generation of teachers who are really familiar with that language, and they're beginning to maybe trying to think beyond just a one mode box and trying to think about how do these all go together. And so I hope that that's some things we can talk about. I want to encourage you guys to have an open, honest conversation. Bring in your experiences from both your, whatever your current teaching situation is, and feel free to share that, whatever it happens to be, perhaps, I don't know, this week or this month, because I know it's constantly sharing. But then also share your experiences from when you were teaching prior to our current educational landscape. So why don't we get started? And here's our first question / statement from the TEL planning domain. So this is from the TEL planning domain, PL6A. And there we're asking teachers how do teachers select strategies to ensure language input comprehensible? So I guess we are starting a little bit in the box for now, and then hopefully as the conversation goes along, we will move along and start interweaving things across all the modes. So so how do you select strategies to make sure that your input is comprehensible? Anybody want to get us started?
Sure, I can speak to that, sure. So I think gosh, I got to say it. I got to say that I'm going to start with backward design and figure out, first of all, what's my purpose? Before I begin to select strategies, what is my purpose? Because then that way I'll be able to choose the strategies that are appropriate for the purpose that I'm trying to accomplish. If I'm just wanting learners to just be able to explore the content of this text, what is this text trying to, because we did say input, right? So what is this text, this media, attempting to teach the learners, expose the learners to, make them aware of? Is that what my purpose is? Or is my purpose for them to capture vocabulary or to discover whatever? And so I just really have to go to my purpose first, and then that can help me select pre-reading strategies or pre-listening strategies that we'll be able to really activate in order to interact with whatever we're using for input.
I love that you chose the word purpose. Like, I feel like you just stole that right out of my mouth too. Like, no, that I love it, because that connects so perfectly. Because I feel like this year in particular, like, I just keep asking myself, why? Why are we doing this? Why do they need this resource? Why are we using this resource? Why did I spend the time looking for this resource? What do I want them to do with it? And I just think that, like, explaining that purpose, like, to me is like the first step, and then to them has been like a huge second step too. When my kids know we're going to use this to do something with it afterwards, it becomes a whole new game.
Yeah, I like what Mike and Shelli was just talking about. And I feel like you definitely, for novice level learners, you need a lot of like visual, maybe body language, right? To help them to understand, to comprehend. But when we move up, I think for intermediate, especially advanced low-level students, you need to use a lot of language. Use the language to help them to comprehend. So I just feel like it's amazing, because sometimes I run into words which I cannot find equivalent English words. So I just have, but to be honest with you, I just feel like actually those kind of words really carry a lot of culture, a lot of, special meaning, value in that. So I just like, we need to build students' comprehension, build their language from the beginning. But I really feel like my goal is move them up, and eventually I can use the language they understand to help them to comprehend. I hope I explained.
Yeah. Ying, I love that you said that, just about that there's not always that English, I'm just going to use that. That's the first language for many of my learners, that English to Spanish word for word translation. And I love it when that doesn't happen.
Yes.
Right? When they keep asking me, but what does this word mean? And I'm like, well, so are you getting the gist of it? Let's go back to the context. What gist are you getting? Well, this is the gist that I'm understanding. That's what the word means. Oh, that just frustrates the mess out of them. It's so great, right? Because that's language, right? Language is not a word for word. There's so much more meaning that's getting carried in what we're trying to communicate. So I love that you said that there's just not that word for word correlation. I love that.
Yeah.
And it sounds just like what the interpretive mode is, really.
Right.
Because we're not trying to get them to do word by word translations. It's, do you get the whole idea of it? Like, can I show you a picture that shows that? My favorite lately has been, can I show you a meme that describes what this word actually means? Like,
oh my gosh, I'm stealing that. I am stealing that. Yes.
What a great idea.
Meme this definition, y'all. Meme it. I love it. I'm writing that down. I have my phone, my digital notes here. This is what I do, y'all. This is what I do. I write things down. Otherwise, I'll forget. Love that. Meme that definition.
Yeah.
Okay. Love that.
Wow.
So you start with the input, and you have these. Then where do we go from there? How do you find these things that you use for input, right? So how do you select those resources that allow them to really dig into that interpretive mode? It's one thing, backwards planning, great idea, obviously big fan. But how do you find those things? And there's always this big debate. Do you find the resource first and then pick the vocabulary, or do you try to find the resource that matches the vocabulary for your unit? Which, secret, it's not possible, right? It doesn't exist because they didn't create that unit in Spain. But so how do we do that? Let's see if we can dig into that question. Who wants to take that one first?
And I think I just usually go to Google. and of course, I use the keywords for novice level. I use keywords to search images first. I just feel like sometimes you have, language embedded in an image. And actually, even maybe, with words students haven't learned yet, but it's okay. And I think definitely starting from image for novice students. I'm sorry, I have to emphasize that. And one advice I received from my dear friends Nicole Nadius, I asked her the question. I said, for languages like Chinese, sometimes I don't expect my students to understand the characters, without, it's not like alphabetic. Sometimes if you learn Spanish or maybe French, you can figure out, some words. But Chinese, no, you can't. So I asked her the question, how do I find authentic material? She gave me a great advice. And she said, think about when kids in the target language countries, when they learn this. She said, go to their textbooks, go to the readings they do at that moment, that level, that age, and see if you can find anything. I think that really, really helps, because I feel like, say, for a lot of students of mine, they, in the novice, high or intermediate level, they are maybe I want to say Chinese elementary school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So I search for, information in that age range. And sometimes I did find good resource.
Absolutely. Those Google searches definitely help. Searching with those keywords for sure. I also love resources that sites like Leslie Grand has got just some amazing things on Pinterest that she is sharing. Guys, I am not ashamed to borrow from colleagues who have already found these things. Like, why would I reinvent the wheel? It's already there, guys. Come on. So definitely reaching out to other colleagues and just, okay, right, we may be doing this same unit at the same time, or they may have done it before me, or I'm able to share with them as well. So I think one way to be able to find some of those resources is your collaborative work with your team, with your colleagues, not just the ones that are in your building, right? But also those who are across our Twitter network, or they're in our TEL network, they are in our district, they're across our region. So definitely staying connected with our regional and local organizations is so helpful, and just expanding our network of ideas, right?
Well said.
Right. I mean, every day on Twitter, there's like a new resource posted from someone. Like,
yes.
And I could spend, I don't even know how many days I could spend on Leslie Grand's website, like just going through the links and just thinking of all the things I want to do, and thinking of all the things I want to do in a normal year, and then like adapting them for this year. And of course, she's got a tab for that.
Yes.
But and this year too, like, I don't know why I hadn't thought of it before, but with more people being at home, the resource I've been tapping the most into are like my native speaker friends or family members or people that I know who can just hop on a Zoom call and like, let's have a conversation. Let's like, tell me about what it was like in March. Like, we did a unit on quarantine. It was we changed the whole housing unit so that it had a totally more relevant focus. So it became more about, all right, what did you do while you were at home? Like, what did you do during quarantine? And talking to native speakers and hearing like what they did, friends that lived in Spain, friends that lived in different parts of the US. And all of a sudden those resources are so much more relevant. And when I, as the teacher, can be like, oh, by the way, like, this is my friend. They're like, no way you have friends. Like, how is that possible? There's no way you don't have friends.
So you all mentioned how, I don't know if the words came out, but it sounded like it was fairly easy to find resources. Talked about Google, talked about accessing networks that we're already part of, or even personal networks of our friends and colleagues. which is great news because I think some teachers do end up spending a lot of time going down the rabbit hole of YouTube and trying to find things, right? We've all done that. So let's say maybe we are more intentional in using those 3 things that you mentioned as really good tips. Then there's the next part though, right? And that is then, what do you do with it once you find it? And I think that's where teachers are really still struggling with it. So they find that video, they find that text, they find even that perfect image. Then what do you do with it? And then what do you do with it in a way that you actually can allow the kids to interpret what it is? Not translate, not try to understand everything, but what do you do with it? And so what are some of your favorite strategies for using that authentic resource that you've then found? Because that's kind of connecting those first 2 criteria together, right? You got to find them and then you got to do something with them. And yeah, who wants to tackle that first?
I can go. My thoughts a little might be controversial, but I actually spend the least amount of time developing what I do with the resource and spend the most time developing what I'm going to do before reading or going through the resource and after going through the resource. Because I think what I've learned over time is I used to just hand out an article and be like, all right, children, let's read, because we're all just going to read this. And I would just sit there in awe, and I was like, well, that's so strange. Like, this group of kids, like, they had like a lot going on with this. This group really struggled with the same concept in the same reading. And so I've spent so much time like before reading, before listening to something, where we're just, let's take out the vocab words we need to do. Let's work with those vocab words. I'll ask a lot of personal questions. If it's a video, taking screenshots of the video and kind of getting them to anticipate what they're about to see or hear, and start just kind of getting them in the mode. Because what I've learned is that every kid's going to come to a resource with different experiences. And if they're all coming with different experiences, they're all going to read it in a totally different way. Same language, same words, but if they all have different things going on, like in their heads, the way they construct that language is going to be totally different. So for me, so much of my planning is in the pre-stages of getting them ready for it.
Amen. Mike, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of everything you just said. And if it's controversial, put me on that train, because we have got to spend much more time in that pre than I think that we are, right? Can I use these images to just exploit the heck out of them, right? How much can I squeeze out of us being able to use these images that you're going to see, or this vocabulary you're going to encounter, or these concepts that you're going to encounter? What can I do before that's going to set you up for when you see or when you hear, you're not entirely, just frustrated?
Yeah. I think I have the same struggle. I think for me, actually, I feel like I have 2 challenges. Number one, I realized that I have collected too many materials. So now my challenge is how to categorize them, how to put them into the right place so I can find them, or I can even remember, I have this piece. And right now, I'm using the AP Chinese 6 themes to, kind of put my authentic materials into different folders. But still, I think I need to figure out a way to, how to use the material I have and design appropriate activities to really targeting students, to improve their proficiency level. And what I have done using authentic material, I think includes, of course, graphic organizer. I think it's a powerful tool. And, if we know what our goals are, we can choose relevant graphic organizers to help students sort the information. And also, I feel that I usually have the following goals for my students. Number one, definitely is the keywords, vocab words. And then I want them to know the big idea.
That's the main idea, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And then I need them to focus on supporting details. So, I use each day I might focus on different things. Eventually, because it takes me so much time to find a piece of material to design activities. I really need my students to really understand, really not just the words. What I mean is just the meaning of the word, also the meaning behind the words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually one piece of authentic material can use multiple times, for different purposes. And I think technology tools these days, we have a lot of technology tools can really help us. Yeah. So it's amazing. I think like a lot of teachers, I used to just use my textbooks. And finally, I got got the courage.
Good for you. Congrats. Yeah.
That's right. I love it.
So before we go on to, we have a question actually from the audience. I wanted to
I'd also like to go back on something she said. I appreciate that you talked about graphic organizers. What I find myself doing these days is taking that resource and really chunking it. Ying, I don't know if that's what you're doing as well.
Yep.
But I'm kind of taking that because I am thinking ahead going, this is not just going to end at an interpretive.
Yes.
Oh, we are going to talk about this thing. You're going to write about this thing. We're going to speak it right.
Yep.
I am thinking about weaving in the different modes of communication. And so I want to set them up for that piece as well. So when I can have them chunk, if I can have them stop, process what you just read, process what you just heard, make note of just something that squared with your thinking. You've seen some of those strategies, right? Something that's still circling around in your head, right? What are 3 points? I'm just thinking of the triangle, square, circle. I may or may not have done that recently, but but just to really have them process, because sometimes I think that even when I do the before and when I do the after, there's still this uncertainty during the time of the reading or during the time of the input, during the time of the listening. And they just need to know, okay, let me just put that down on some paper that this is what I'm still processing, or this is what I've understood. Yay, right? So just kind of that stop and checkpoint. I'm also trying to use that too.
So I had actually a follow-up question before we get to the audience question, because Mike, you said it's kind of controversial, and Shelli said, yeah, I'm on that controversial train too. So I don't know why you guys said that. So let me just see how you feel about this, because what I think I heard you say is that you're previewing these resources, right? I guess maybe, stop me if I'm wrong, pre-teaching some of the vocabulary. Is that correct? And so. And so that's why I personally sometimes cringe a little bit, because I'm like, oh, but in the real world, we don't have time to. I'm going to go to a brand new store and like, oh crap, I didn't. Nobody pre-taught me this kind of vocabulary, and now I can't go shopping in here, right? So is there? I think you guys mentioned fantastic strategy, but is there also any kind of value at just using the actual resource to get kids to perhaps get that new vocabulary from the get-go without those pre-teaching steps? And what are some ways you can use them? Okay, so go ahead. Like, how do you do that?
I recently used an infographic about elements of well-being, and all I said was our pre-viewing or our pre-reading for this was, hey, did you know that there are 8 elements of well-being? What do you think those 8 elements are?
Okay.
So then their purpose for reading was, let's see if our pre-list matched up with what this infographic says. Like, let me see if I can do that part. And then, okay, now, what does this even mean, right? What is, because the infographic explained each of the elements. And so then they got to do some further diving, but I didn't pre-teach that vocabulary.
So when you guys said pre-viewing activities, you really were talking more about activating prior knowledge or things like that to make them ready for whatever is to come, not necessarily what I see sometimes, which is like, you must know all these words, and then we can read this book.
Right. No.
Right. Yeah. Which is the opposite of interpretive. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah. Thanks for letting us clarify that. At least for me.
I would actually even say that sometimes I will admit that I will pre-teach certain vocabulary words because it's not every word that's going to be in the text. If I looked at it, if I found a text and I said, you need to know every single word in order to do this text, I would have to write everything, and it would be in the most basic non-human language that has ever existed. That wouldn't be something we do. So I think
you don't give your friends a list of words they can use when you record their.
You must use.
Only say those words. Ideally in this order because that's why they're on the list.
Let me basically just put them in a sentence for you now.
But
no, I think that there's some value in like some pre-teaching strategies, and even within those pre-teaching strategies, you could teach them some word strategies as they encounter new words in a text as well. So like talking about word families, talking about prefixes and stuff like that, which I know is very academic and totally not real world in that sense. But I think of interpretive as like we're building a skill, and we're just every single time we do it, we're just peeling off another layer of it. We're just trying to get you to the point where you can be kind of a little bit more autonomous and you don't need all of those sorts of supports ahead of time.
And one thing I tried recently with my AP Chinese class is that instead of I give them a list, like a vocab list, I ask them to build, personalize their own vocab list, because each kid, the language, level is a little different. So I think for me, I really want to hold them accountable for this learning. It's not just me doing the work. I think, yeah, that actually, I feel like opens the door for the students. Of course, my ending goal is the same. It doesn't matter if you have only one word on your personalized list or you have 10, it doesn't matter. But eventually my goal is you can all understand this piece. So I saw some smiling face, on Zoom. I'm like, oh, okay, I know those words already. I don't need to, like.
Great.
Yeah.
So I have a question that kind of relates to the idea of interpretive, and it's a current challenge. So let's take a look at this challenge, which is from Nali, and she asked, so how do you handle target language use in an online hybrid class? Which is obviously the reality. Here we are trying to do interpretive mode, which by definition would require some target language input. And that input isn't always an infographic. It isn't always a video. It isn't always a text. Sometimes it's just you too, right? So how do you deal with that? Or even when you use some of those resources, you'll probably be introducing it using target language. And what are some of your tips for doing this in an online hybrid class?
I've realized that what I'm saying, although I might be adding some extra fluff to it, but the basic of what I'm saying has got to be up on the screen, because I've got kids who, Miss Brown, you're cutting in and out on us. Okay, like, all right, right? So I can't, yes, while I'm working on this, read the screen, right? So like I'm trying to, thank you. That's a great question. I'm trying to handle it as best I can. And I don't know if I'm handling it very well, but that's one thing that I've definitely noticed is that sometimes it's not, am I being comprehensible? It really is the logistical piece of, no, my audio just isn't working as well, right? And so then I'm losing some comprehensibility there, but that's not the target language that I've chosen.
But that's a great lesson for us to take back into the classroom, right? I mean, I think we get complacent or very comfortable in our classrooms. They're right there. Of course, they can hear us, and we think they can hear us. But perhaps this is a really good, important reminder. Like, what visual supports are we providing them when we're just talking?
Right.
I was once working with a group of teachers. There were Chinese teachers and some Urdu teachers and Arabic teachers, and we had them micro-teach to each other to really experience what it's like. And it was a very simple demo, but they were doing it to the language that they weren't teaching. And I forgot how to say it, but it was something in Urdu where they had to say, they just start teaching yes, no, so they can use the yes, no answers. And apparently in Urdu, it's a 2-syllable word. And they were using their face. They were going something like, no. And what happened is somebody then raised their hand. Whenever your head moves the other way, I don't hear the second syllable. I don't know what you're saying.
Right.
Which, of course, they hadn't even thought about because we're in this really safe space of PD. It was a great aha moment. But how often do we have those?
Yeah.
And so I think this aha moment that you had with your kids saying, I don't hear what you're saying. And even if it's a technical thing, maybe it's not a technical thing. Maybe they really have a hard time hearing it.
Right.
Because I don't know how many students you guys have, but there's certainly plenty of teachers who now have 40 or 50 kids in their classrooms.
Yep.
To be able to project in a way that every kid understands, that's certainly a challenge. But what are some of the other ones?
With a mask.
With a
mask.
Right.
There's that one.
Yeah. Mask. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm at the grocery store and they can't understand me through the mask. And I'm like,
so what are some other tips you guys have for Nelly?
I'm teaching Chinese 1 this year, 9th grade high school freshmen learning, Chinese online. And I really feel sorry for them, really. And one student emailed me and said, can you please give us more breakout room time so I can make some friends? I think it used to be so easy in a classroom, you group them together and do some group work or pair work to help them get to know each other. But now, even though I tried, more breakout rooms, when I jumped into the breakout room, they were not really talking to each other. So I think that makes it really hard. And for me, I used to have those posters with classroom expressions, in my classroom. But now I think I just put them on an image and use that as my virtual background. I hope at least when I say, follow me, I can let them see my virtual background. But it's not enough. It's totally not enough. And I just feel like on this hybrid or, remote learning environment, I'm not giving my students enough individual attention as I would like to, but yeah, I just feel really, really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I don't know if I have the answer either. Like, I don't think any, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like we're all in the same sort of boat. We're like, well, let's hope. We're really hoping this works. I have two kind of opposite things that have worked for me. I've been doing a lot of non-language producing sorts of things where I'll say I'll ask very simple comprehension sorts of questions, and I'll say, go to the reactions button on Zoom, give me a party hat if you understand, give me a heart if you think this, just so that they get those little reactions. I saw another one on Twitter, and I really wish I could give the credit to the person, but I do not remember who it is, so I'm so sorry. But I saw another one where it was turn your cameras on if you vote this opinion, turn your cameras off if you vote this opinion. And so there was starting to get kids to turn their cameras on and off. It was starting to show the teacher, where do you side with things? Yeah, we don't know full comprehension, but we know that, as they were turning their cameras on and off, you started to see where kids maybe opinion questions ended up or their answers. And then the other thing was, Ying, you were talking about breakout groups. In this last spring, when I used to send kids to breakout groups, I just was like, oh, you'll talk. You'll just talk in Spanish, and I'll show up in the breakout group, and there'll be this magical moment where you'll already be speaking Spanish. And I think once that happened, and my heart melted, and then the rest of the times it didn't happen. And what I found was the more times I gave them the words they maybe needed to do those tasks, and there's a lot out there for interpersonal, how to express your opinions, but even interpretive, how to go through a text together. Look here, do you see this? What does that mean? Talk, if you're going to work through something with a breakout group, thinking it that way.
Oh, absolutely.
That sounds like a perfect transition, actually, as we're at the halfway point to get into the interpersonal conversation.
Yeah. I'm using so many sentence frames and sentence starters, and give you just a moment to just get in your thoughts real quick, and then I'm going to send you. I'm not just going to say, okay, go guys, right? I'm going to give you a moment to just breathe and think, and then I'll send you so that you know what you're going to do. What I've also figured out is that I don't know where folks stand on social emotional learning, but I got to tell you, if I don't have that, these kids are not going to speak to each other in any language. So, right? I've got to spend time just letting them find that place of belonging, socially and emotionally. Like, they know that we're a family. They know that we're going to get in and we're going to chit chat. Yep. And they're going to be heard and they're going to be seen. Even if your camera's off, you are going to be seen in my class. That's got to be, for me, that has to be the first thing that I do. So then it doesn't feel so bad when we're now needing to talk to each other in a breakout room or what have you. So,
and I wonder if the breakout room problem, quote unquote, and Mike, you already said, you mentioned some strategies, and Shelli, we're talking about some ideas of how to help people, is also a matter of understanding where they are on the proficiency scale, right? Mm-hmm. So many of our classes are at the novice level, mm-hmm. and even if they're whatever in the early intermediates, we're still talking about we're talking about an environment where you have to be incredibly safe. So to jump on Shell, I think be able to speak, like even in a real classroom situation, right?
Yes.
That's so scary for them. Yes. So as we get to that next question, then how do you plan activities that allow them to produce language within their range? And if we're going to talk about range, it's a pretty small range, right? It's certainly at the lower level of proficiency, and that brings all kinds of challenges, face to face or online. So let's basically begin to talk about how do we get them to produce this language. We had all these, you guys came up with some shared ideas for providing input and how to plan for it and how to find the resources and how to stay in a target language, but you guys all wanted to already talk about it at the beginning because you kept saying it's going to lead to something. So what is it going to lead to, and how do you make that connection between what we just talked about to producing language? And notice that I use that term producing language instead of output. I'm trying to get rid of not even using the word input output, but more it's like, processing language that you've been exposed to, and then producing language might be better, because output seems almost like a loaded word at this point. And it also feels like I'm just dumping it out.
Yes.
Which is not really what we don't, that limits them to novice, right? I would think then they are a parakeet. They can output probably all day long.
Right.
And sometimes I think some people think that their kids are higher than they are because they're having output, and novices can trick us into believing that they're intermediates by just saying a lot, by outputting a lot, but they're not really producing language. Right. So I think that's the distinction I hope you guys will take.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
For me, it's thinking about like the expectations of like what I want them to do. Like, for example, thinking about like a breakout group. If I want them in that breakout group, I want to think about what words do they need in order to do that, right? And let me plan ahead. What tools do they need in order to do that? And also the latest thing I've been really kind of focusing on is like timing and grouping. How much time am I putting you in this group for? How long do I expect you to actually talk for? Like, if I have like, novice, high, intermediate, low students, am I going to put you in a breakout group for 10 minutes and then actually be disappointed when I come into the breakout group and you're no longer speaking in the language? Like, thinking about like how long do they need to actually do that task, and like does that task merit that much, right? And like that was an awakening moment for me when I did a feedback thing with my kids. I was like, so how are things going? What needs to change? And they're like, way too long in breakout groups. And like I was like, absolutely, you got it. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, that's always been the moment advice when working with teachers, like just play it out in English to see how much language it is and how long it really takes. Here's my level 1 class, and I'm going to give them 10 minutes to have this conversation. Like, nope.
My God.
Right. It's 2 sentences. They'll take 30 seconds total. Both of them together.
By the time you're in the breakout group, everybody turns their microphones on. Like,
yeah.
Still 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like what Shelli was talking earlier. For sentence starters, I think that's kind of support we need to give our students if we want them to produce language. And also, I think I always have a step to have students brainstorm. If I have a task for them, these days you can use Padlet, you can use Google Jamboard to have them post ideas. So I think that will really ease the level of anxiety or being nervous. And I actually use Google Slides a lot. And so if I have a task, I just create a Google slide, and each student will have one slide, and they can start to work on their own slide, but other students can see each slide. I think that really helps. And as a teacher, when they work on their individual slide, I just go through the slides. When I see something amazing, I will start to say, oh, look at who John's slide, and because he just put this on the slide. I think it's a way to give students a hint, like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want you, my expectation, I want you to do to I think. And at the beginning I was a little worried because I thought they would just copy each other's work. It hasn't happened yet. Knock on the wood. No. I think actually they inspire each other. It's also a way of community building. I think I like it.
Absolutely, Ying. And I notice with my learners when they're able to kind of do that brainstorming ahead of time, because I wonder if your learners have the same thing that mine do. Sometimes they just need help getting started. Like once they get going, oh my gosh, they are gone. I got to rein them back in, right? But they just need a little help getting started. And so when they see some of, okay, here's a question. Oh, okay, yeah, I could ask that question. And anytime we do what you do, Mike, okay, so tell me about this, right? They'll say, it really helped that we had that. I had to look at that a couple times. Okay, great. But they needed to know that safety blanket was there. I love what my dad says. He says it a lot. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Can you say that again, please, Jen?
Oh, sure. I'm quoting my dad. He says it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Love it.
Right? And so they know that safety blanket is there, and they may or may not use it, but they know that it's there if they need to.
Yes.
And so,
love it.
Yeah, I like them being able to have that and just get them started. Just get them started. Yep. And then they can fly, little birdies.
I love both of those ideas. I love that. Like that. It's that, like, it's kind of like a twofold thing where it's like there's modeling going on, and it, like, so maybe I write the model or maybe other kids are writing those models, and it just kind of tells them ahead of time, like, all right, this is how you can get started. This is something to get you thinking. And if I write it as the teacher, I can say, all right, I'm going to write this as an intermediate low. What do they need in order to be an intermediate low? Let me think ahead of what that actually looks like. And then there's kind of a little bit of accountability almost with that too, because I know, like, earlier on when everybody was still figuring out remote learning and everything like that, like making sure that some kids were doing that. And it's like the Google Slides and Google Jamboard were great for that. But it's like, all right, so I'm being held accountable for what I'm actually producing right now. Mm-hmm. And maybe that accountability is like taking, what you read about and now let's write about it, where it's like, I'm accountable for what I read, I'm accountable for what I write now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, accountability is a great transition to, believe it or not, we have to go to our very last question already. I know it goes really fast. But there's a connection, so we can keep talking about it. But the last one is how do you plan ways for students to reflect upon the language they produce? First, how much did they produce, and then also what did they produce, and then of course the whole purpose of it is how can they refine their output? And I know there's the word there that I didn't want us to use, but it's there anyways. How do you do that? And I would think in the scenario that we're in now, it's probably even more important than ever to get them to realize, even if it's what they perceive maybe as very little, to show them how much they're actually doing. It seems like there's so much conversation about how little kids are learning, which in my mind just seems always so insulting to you guys who are working every single day. It's like, oh, I'm pretty sure the kids are learning a whole lot, actually. And in some cases, maybe even learning more than before. But what kind of opportunities are you giving your students to really think about, oh wow, we did this, and look at what I can do. And do they have those moments? And then I'll leave you with one little anecdote from a colleague of mine who taught elementary school. And the kids, you know, they had some bad experiences with their Spanish teacher, and they didn't think they could do it. And she just had to change the attitude. And so every day she had those kindergarten and first graders, "Si se puede," and that became their slogan. Every time a kid was able to do something, they were able to mark their "Si se puede" chart off. So and eventually that became part of the mantra in that classroom. And it was it was obviously an elementary version, but it worked. It worked really well. And so wondering what you guys are doing to help kids reflect, and then really take those reflections to the next level to help them to move up in their own proficiency.
I love having my learners do a plus delta, and they can do as many pluses as they want, but they can only do one delta. But their pluses are, I was just in this conversation, what did I do well? What do I want to make sure I do again when I have another conversation? What do I want to make sure I do again when I present, right? What did my partner do that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to steal that. That was great, right? They did this, right? Just really identifying the things that they and others are doing well. And so they give themselves and each other some shout outs. So I love that we do that plus. And then the delta, what's one thing that you want to try not to do next time? And so they have a habit of being really, really hard on themselves. And right? Yeah, I'm seeing the nods. They can be really hard on themselves. And so maybe I have a list. Maybe I'm listening to some things, because I'm also, like Thomas was saying, I'm trying to push their proficiency up as well. So maybe I'm listening for some things, and I can say, okay, here's some things I heard that may be keeping you from moving your language forward. Which of these things do you want to be able to, maybe I'm creating that list as I'm listening. Maybe they are, right, as I'm training them, and they're getting a little bit more refined in how they can be more self-aware with what they can do, and what their next step could be.
I want to just build on what Shelli was talking about. I think I use similar strategies. I call that 3, 2, 1. Like 3 things you learn from this class or this session, this chapter, and 2 things you want to explore more, and 1 thing you still feel like you don't really get it. And it can be any 3, 2, 1. You name it. Sometimes I ask students to do peer feedback, so they can also do 3, 2, 1. Like 3 things I want to, 3 roses, or or 1 suggestion, or 2. Whatever you think about 3, 2, 1, you can do.
Yeah, I like it.
Follow that format. And another thing I feel like it's very important is, as teachers, we need to model how to do reflection. And it's actually, it was one of my aha moments. I think once I gave my students a project, it didn't go well. So I start to ask my students, give me feedback. How can I change my prompt, make it better? And then I had that moment. I was like, oh my God, they need to see how even teachers, we need to reflect too. And I think it's a great opportunity to build this growth mindset. You can learn the language, you can do better. And I'm not judging you on your score. It's like the effort. I really want to see you putting your effort into this learning process. And yeah, I think this is really one of my favorite topics. How students do reflection, how we teachers also, should really keep reflecting on what goes well and what we need to improve. And yeah.
And that's so scary to do, isn't it? Like every time I give that question, I sit there and I'm like, okay, and then I put myself in the students' point of view too, and I'm like, how do they feel when they get the feedback back from me? I love like Shelli, I love your idea of like the more pluses than the deltas, where because the district I work in, like the students are like they are very grade centered. They're focused on, okay, how can I get the A? And it's like when we do reflections, it's like, all right, just like how Thomas was trying to get us to not use the word output, I'd say you can't use the word grade. It's like I don't want to hear the grades part right now. I want to hear like let's like reflect on how you're doing. Like now is like, because it's like February, we're about halfway, a little over halfway, maybe even depending on where you work. Like I know, right? I have like 4 more months. Not that I wish my students goodbye, because I actually love them all so much this year.
Yeah.
But this is the time of year where I'm like, okay, like this would, in a normal year, this is when we would do a mid-year reflection. So we do like reflections on individual stuff, but then it's like, let's think back to where you were in September. Let's think to where you started from. Like, can you give me some proof of like, what were you doing in September? What are you doing now? What do you think you're going to do in June? Let's take some guesses of where you're going to be in June. I love doing those sorts of questions. And I think, Ying, you're right. You're totally right, though. They like the modeling, because we think, oh, they've reflected before. They've been like, if they come up to us in high school, they're like, you've been reflecting your whole life. Everybody's telling you to reflect. But it's like, no, we have to show them a little bit of like how we reflect on our lessons, how we reflect on our projects, and how we want them to kind of reflect on things too. And so I think now is like I think coming back from, we're on February break this week, coming back, that's a great segue to kind of start things off as we start this like February to April long haul of like, all right, let's look back at where we've come so far.
I'm stealing that, Mike. That's my SEL check-in when I do get to see my learners again. We're doing a midpoint check-in. I like it.
Are your students aware, and how do you make them aware of say what performance level they're at or what proficiency target they're shooting for? What are some ways of how do you communicate that with them?
My students are sick and tired of hearing me talk about it at this point. I have it tattooed into their brains at this point, but I think that it's super important, because I think like telling them, talking through the first week of the course, we did like, I don't know if anybody's seen the taco activity or that they have out there, where you explain the different proficiency levels using like a very simple concept. We use remote learning instead of tacos, because they had a lot to say about remote learning. And like in a normal year, I would also revisit that again and say, okay, let's do that again. Or my other favorite thing to do is on the actual YouTube page, you can find all different, like the OPI interviews. Let's listen to what somebody at an intermediate level sounds like. Which one do you think you sound like? Why do you think that? Like, those have been fun for them.
Yeah, and sometimes kids just need like almost like a daily reminder. I remember finding myself in the classroom completely unannounced for that teacher, and the teacher was explaining an activity, and I was sitting two kids in the back, and of course halfway through the explanation they started doing the activity, and by the time the teacher was done explaining, those 2 knuckleheads were finished with the activity, and the teacher kind of caught on to that, and so she reminded everybody and just said, oh, wait a minute, stop. What's the proficiency goal in this class? And she pointed to the back of the room, and there was a giant N and H letter on like a huge metal board, and the whole class screamed, novice high. And then she asked those 2 boys, so what's that mean for this activity? And so they said it and said, okay, well, that's how I want you to do it. So it was like, it took 30 seconds, probably not even that much, but it was a really nice reminder, and maybe not a reflection, a truer sense of what, but it was a reflection for those 2 kids. Yeah, I can do this activity like this, or I can do it like this, not because the teacher asked me to do it, but because this is our goal, or this is my goal for the class. And it was really, really powerful. And I was like, oh, yes.
Love that.
So anything else that you guys use? I heard you say midterm reflection, beginning year reflection, anything else to give kids feedback as far, or opportunities to reflect on how well they're doing, and also that part about how they get better. This refining, because that's the other thing. We know the kids stay. We've figured out. Well, some of us have figured out how to get kids out of novice quickly, but then they're going to be intermediate for a very long time, and that's going to be frustrating for those kids. Yeah. So I'm thinking those kids really need those reflection opportunities even more than anybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any strategies or any ideas?
I feel like because, I think for novice students, it's chunk of words, short sentences. But when they move up, they start to do, short paragraph. And I start to just tell them, I need you to produce in short paragraph. And they know, I think by taking English, they know what short paragraph means. So, and then I think I start to ask my students, how do you connect? We did this kind of practice in class. How do you connect two short sentences into, like sentence? I think without practice like this, it's hard. They might stay in those short sentence format for a longer time. So
Well, but remember, Ying, and that's, I think we forget, we're the only class where they get to do that, right? In all the other classes, we usually ask them for short sentences. It's multiple choice, short answers. They don't really get to, that's what they're struggling with in those other classes, right? We want them, those teachers are trying to get the teachers to do the same thing we're doing. It's just, we have strategies because that is the job of us to do. So it's almost not their fault. They kind of been conditioned. The other 6 periods of the day, that's all the teacher asked for was one-word answer or a sentence answer. So it's almost like you have to recondition them in your class to do that. And so that awareness that is really important, right?
Yeah. We've been leveraging, Thomas, we've been trying to leverage class writes so that we're writing together.
Oh, nice.
And it's not done. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this first step of the class write together. And then you're going to do the first step of that task. Okay. Now you do your own, right? Okay. Now we're going to come back to the class write. Okay, guys. All right. So this is where we're trying to reach. Let's take a look at this. Where can we, right? Like if I'm really wanting to bring an awareness, then going back to what Ying said, I've got to model that going back. It's not just I wrote this, I'm done, I'm golden, right? And so, or you've turned this in and it's going to get this grade and now I'm done with it, right? But that there really is a process that we're taking this piece through. So we've been trying to leverage that.
I like the idea, going back. That's a really important, It's not done, right? That's also my job for the kids too.
I think they got sick of seeing it. They were like, no, it's perfect. It's perfect. No, because I see, and they're like, oh, we got to go back again. Yes, we do.
That's my idea. I'm stealing from you, Shelli. I've never thought to do the class writes like that and just keep coming back to it like that. I love that. I also love that the first thing we talked about was not in terms of refining was text type. I love that that's where this conversation ended up. That it was that's something we can actually be strategies we can control. The kids can control. They can actually reflect on them, really see that. Absolutely. Versus I can give you a score on your accuracy, and that only goes so far. So it's choosing what I reflect on. I've been big on variety of vocabulary words you can throw in in text type, because that to me is you have some control over those sorts of things, and the other parts are just part of the process a little bit. So it's almost unfair for me to ask you to totally reflect on that.
So true. Yeah.
That is so true. That's good. I'm writing that down.
Well, I hope as you guys are writing those nice notes down, and I know people who are watching have written down lots of things, and I hate to stop this conversation, but that's how it always happens. The hour goes by so fast. But I want to just thank the three of you for taking time on what's for some of you a very, very cold, historically cold Tuesday evening.
Historically cold.
Thank you for sharing all your thoughts, your ideas, your strategies. I know people love hearing from real teachers who are in the trenches doing this, and that's why we're trying to provide these opportunities for just having teachers having some real conversation, providing some real solutions. I hope you, the panelists, and other people will join us. Our next live feature panel is on March 16th. Where we're talking about, not a controversial topic whatsoever, but it's all about interculturality, and what does mean, maybe moving beyond the 3 Ps. And I've had a long conversation about that this week too. So it should be a really interesting conversation with those panelists. So thank you for taking time again.
Thank you.
It's been a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I've gotten so many ideas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Stay
Have a
warm.
good night.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.